For more, aviation analyst Fabrizio Poli joins us now live from Manchester. Thanks so much for speaking to us, Fabrizio. I mean, this investigation, we know it's in its infancy, but bits and pieces of information are dripping out. Tell me what you make of what you're hearing so far.
Well, first of all, the 737-800 is a very reliable airplane. I personally have flown it as a pilot for over 5,000 hours, never had a problem. So the airplane's very reliable. It's interesting to see that the aircraft actually got to about 5,000 feet above ground before it started to descend, and there was obviously fire in that. So I'd rule out things like icing, the cause of the accident. So there's obviously a fire of some sort. Whether the fire was caused by the engine blowing up, caused by just the engine blowing up for some reason, or there was a bomb on board, or it was hit by a missile, I don't know. It is an interesting fact that there was another pilot on the jump seat, so there were 3 pilots on the flight deck. So the pilots may have been undergoing some form of training or a check. That's an interesting fact. The other thing which I'm a bit sort of big question mark is the Iranian authorities said they're not going to allow Boeing to have the black box. Now, we know that Boeing right now is going through a bit of a difficult patch because of the 737 MAX accident that happened last year. Those airplanes have been grounded. You know, for the 737-800 to crash, that's not good for Boeing. And I think it's important for Boeing to understand why this accident happened.
Right. It does seem unfair for Boeing. I mean, can they do something about that? Is Iran allowed to hold back those black boxes once it's completed, especially its investigation?
Well, I mean, it happened in Iranian territory, Ukraine aircraft. So obviously the Ukrainian authorities are going to be involved. The Iranian authorities are going to be involved. I mean, eventually Boeing will get the information. But if I was a Boeing executive right now, I'd really want to see the black box now and be involved in the initial stage of the investigation. But the Iranians can, you know, it happened in their own country. Everything is there in their country. They can do what they want. Unfortunately.
Right.
So this could create some sort of more tension between the US and Iran, but it's still early to really understand what really did happen here.
Okay, you know, another piece of information, though, that slipped out. Iranians are saying that there was no emergency call or distress call from the pilots before the plane went down. In what kind of situation would nobody be able to make any sort of call for help or at least send out any kind of emergency signal?
Well, first of all, engine failures on takeoff usually happen immediately after takeoff. And what the pilots need to do, they coordinate between each other, some memory items the pilots need to do. But one of the things they do is advise air traffic control that they've had a failure and what their intention is. This call didn't happen. So this makes me think that there was some form of internal explosion, or it may have been hit by something. I don't think it's a natural failure. But again, I don't know how the pilots are trained in Ukraine, what the standards are, what their standard operating procedures are. But if it was something that happened, like a normal emergency, some form of communication would have happened from the airplane to the air traffic controllers. And because that didn't happen, there's suspicion there that it may have been an external factor that caused this crash, meaning a missile or a terrorist bomb or something like that. But again, it's still early days.
It is. And we don't want to speculate. I understand that. But, you know, as far as the plane is concerned, it underwent a maintenance check, as far as we know, I think less than 48 hours, actually, before the plane took off. As you said, it's this Boeing 737 model is very reliable. This plane itself was only a few years old. And Iran is saying, well, no, it's just coincidence that, you know, short-range ballistic missiles were being fired in the area within around the same time range as when this plane went down. So, yes, I know we don't want to speculate, but wow, that's an amazing coincidence.
Yeah, it is. And one has to wonder if it was intentionally shot down or the missile hit the airplane by mistake. That can happen. That's happened before. So I really, you know, it's really early days to understand. And of course, you know, all these coincidences are there, which leads someone to suspect that maybe the airplane was shot down.
So how should this actually affect travel to Iran as well as over Iranian airspace?
Well, I would be very careful. I mean, if anybody is planning to travel to Iran on business and that, I would delay that right now. I'd stay away from the region. Even with some of my clients that fly in their private jets around the world for business, I'm recommending to not go to Iran. So right now, just, let's just stay away and see how things develop over the next few weeks, and then make a decision from there. That's just my personal opinion. Yeah.
Okay, Fabrizio Poli, thank you so much for sharing your analysis with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, joining me now from Manchester is the aviation analyst, Fabrizio Poli. Fabrizio, thank you for joining us on the NewsHour. First of all, what did you make of Justin Trudeau's announcement there that a lot of the intelligence pointed to a surface-to-air missile?
Well, when I had my interview earlier today with one of your anchor news people, I said that my suspicion was it was a missile, because looking at the fact that the pilots didn't call, there was no communication from the pilots. If it had been a normal emergency, one of the things that the pilots do, and being a 737 pilot myself with over 5,000 hours on this airplane, that's what I would have done, is I would have let air traffic control that we were in an emergency situation and we would have dealt with it. There was none of that happen. So it did lean towards that direction. So it doesn't surprise me that this information has come out now that it was a missile. Now the next question is, was it intentional or unintentional?
Mm. And how would that be determined, or is that actually not something that can be known for sure?
Well, the thing is, I mean, what they'll do now is they'll collect all the debris and they'll kind of rebuild the airplane in a hangar, and then the investigation committee will go in there. And I understand there's people from Canada going over there, from the US, even from the UK. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he will send some English accident investigators over to have a look as well, and help to sort of try and figure out what happened. If they do find that it was a missile, there is no way from looking at the debris to know if it was intentional or unintentional. That's something the Iranians will have to tell us, and whether they will or not, that's a question which I can't answer.
Indeed, but it seems that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was being quite optimistic about what sort of cooperation he could expect from the Iranians, but at the same time he was not able to say that the Iranians would commit to allowing Canada full access to the investigation, nor could he with confidence say that Iran would share the black box with them. Do you trust that this investigation will be carried out in a full and transparent way, or do you have your doubts yourself?
Well, I mean, I've worked in third world countries as a pilot, and some of the things that go on, things happen and they hide a lot of what happened or how things really went, unfortunately. But, if we can listen to the cockpit voice recorder, for example, and hear there were 3 pilots on the flight deck. There was a captain, a very experienced first officer, and also an instructor pilot in the cockpit. So no doubt there would have been conversations going amongst them when the missile hit. So it'd be interesting to hear that conversation. Obviously, the conversation was in Russian, which hopefully translators will be able to tell us what the pilots actually were saying. So that's one aspect. Hopefully, they'll recover the black box and they'll disclose all the information, and then we'll be able to put the pieces together on exactly what happened. But, whether it was intentional or unintentional, one needs to ask the question, well, if it was intentional, why was it intentional? What would be the motive behind intentionally shooting down a Ukraine aircraft full of Iranians? They're shooting down their own people, and some Canadian citizens and a few other people. Why would they shoot that airplane down? That's the question that probably the intelligence agencies need to look at, finding the answer to that one, not somebody like myself, who I'm an aviation analyst, and that I give you that my view from a pilot perspective, but not from an intelligence perspective.
Fabrizio Poli, thank you so much for your analysis. Really appreciate it here on the NewsHour. We are going to move on